If you're watching this video, there's a good chance you already know what this is and you're probably interested in purchasing it. You want to see what it's capable of and if it's worth it, if it's going to do what you want it to do. I'm going to walk through the features really quickly. I'm going to break down a few things that I found a little bit confusing in the manual, and then I'm going to put this to the test. I'm going to figure out if this could be useful for me in what I do. So if we're just going to dive right into the features, the pedal has two main modes, intelligent harmony mode and poly override mode. It's really important to understand the difference between these two modes if you want to get the most out of this pedal. If you're looking for something just to give you harmony to what you're already playing, I think you're probably going to want to start with the intelligent mode. So you'd need to select a key that you're in, major or minor, whether or not it's sharp, and then you just select whatever interval or harmony that you want to hear on the interval select knob, and as long as you play within the key you selected, it's going to sound really good. So for example, let's say I'm playing in the key of C major and I want to just put a third above it. I don't really want to have to think any more than that other than just playing in the key of C major. I want to just make sure I have the settings on the pedal correct, and then all I need to do from there is just dial in the mix of the harmony and the overall volume of the sound. If I find that's a little bit too much, I can just dial back the mix until I'm happy with the sound. As long as you're in intelligent harmony mode, this is going to work for any key you choose and any of the intervals you select for your harmony. Now you can do the same thing in any key as long as you play the notes in the key you have selected. So let's say I want to try something in A minor, and this time I want a third and a fifth above the note I'm playing. Those are the two settings I find most useful for what I like to do, either just the straight third harmony or the third and the fifth above. You have all kinds of other options at your disposal though. You could take harmonies below the note, you could have a fifth, you could have an octave, all sorts of different things in the intelligent harmony mode. A third below in the key of E would sound like this. This is where it kind of helps to know a little bit about music theory, because when it's telling you a third below, it's not actually a third to the E, it's a third below the E, which actually makes it a fifth. So if I'm playing an E, essentially what's happening is it's putting a B below the E. B is the fifth of E, so you're getting the fifth of the note, however, it's a third below. If you find that confusing, take a look down below in the description. I've got a link where you can get a free guide to all of the harmonies in this pedal and what's actually happening. I think the best way to explain the difference between the poly override mode and the intelligent harmony mode is to show you with a tuner. What actually happens when you're in the intelligent harmony mode is it selects the correct interval depending on the scale that you're in. However, when you're in poly override mode, it actually just gives you the interval based on the original note. So for instance, let's take a look at the key of C major and I'll show you the difference. To demonstrate, I've got the wet signal turned all the way up so that my tuner is only just going to hear the affected wet note. I've got this set to C major and I've got it set to just a third above. I chose C major because it has no sharps or flats, so it's going to be a little bit easier to talk about the theory side of things. So here's my C note. Now if I kick on the pedal and I play the same note, it gives me an E. So an E is a third above C. It's a major third. That makes a lot of sense. What if I go to the next note in the scale though, if I go to my D? So there's my D on the tuner, and if I kick the pedal in, now it's playing an F note. Now F is a third of D, but it's actually a minor third. And in the case of the key of C major, the F note is natural, whereas if we are actually thinking about D in terms of its actual key of D major, the F should be sharp. So D to F sharp is a major third, D to F is a minor third, and in the key of C, it needs to be the F note, otherwise it's not going to sound good. Now, if I switch to poly override mode and do the same thing, we're going to get a different result. Let's just walk through the same two notes so you can see how it's going to differ. Again, if I play my C, and then I kick the pedal on, it changes it to an E. If I play a D, and then I kick the pedal on, now it changes it to an F sharp. So what's actually happening there is it's essentially just assuming that it's going to be a major third above every single note, no matter what. We're no longer taking into account what key we're playing in, and it's always just going to give you a major third above the note. If I tried to play in C major and I had the poly override mode on, some notes are going to sound good and some notes not so much. Now if I turn poly override off, So you might be wondering what poly override mode is actually useful for, and that's a really good question at this point. Where I think poly override mode really shines is if you're wanting to do any kind of detuning of your guitar. Now, the nice thing about this pedal here is it allows you to actually detune lower or higher. So you can essentially put your guitar either in a drop tuning or play as if you have a capo on. In order to do this, you need to make sure the mix knob's all the way up because we don't want to hear any of your original signal. And then all you have to do is you just have to select the interval either lower or higher that you want to be hearing. So one of the really, really useful things you can do with this pedal is actually just take it and tune your guitar half a step down without actually having to touch anything. So here it is in standard tuning. All I have to do on the pedal is make sure it's in poly override, make sure my mix is all the way up, and just select the correct interval. I'm going to switch it to setting number 7, and I'm going to make sure that the major or minor mode is selected minor or in the up position to give me the correct interval. Now I can play the same thing half a step down. You can go anywhere from 1 to 5 semitones below the note on your guitar, which actually means you can go as low as a baritone guitar. I have it in the baritone setting now, so I have it in setting number 2. I've got my mix all the way up, and I've got it in poly override mode, and it's going to take my E, and it's going to drop that down 5 semitones to a B. Now I've got a baritone. If I want to pitch up my guitar and essentially play like I'm having a capo on without having to put a capo on, I can do the same thing. So for instance, if I wanted to play like I had a capo on one, all I need to do is just pick the correct interval, make sure my mix is all the way up, and have myself in poly override mode, and I'm good to go. Standard tuning reference, and then that should put me to an F. 1/2 step up, and I can play in that key. Just like the drop tuning, I'm able to go 5 semitones up, so I can go as high as if I had a capo on the 5th fret. Let's say I wanted to take a D note and make it sound like a G. I keep all my settings on the pedal the same, I just select the correct interval. In this case, the interval selection knob goes to setting 5, and I can take my D, and I can turn it into a G. So now when I play a D chord, it's high pitched, but it actually sounds like a G chord. This could be a great way to accompany somebody who's actually playing in the key of G if you wanted to open up some different sounds and you didn't have a capo. So when we're talking about the poly override mode, there's something that kind of confused me a little bit when it came to playing with drop tunings or capo tunings. On page 5 of the manual, it breaks down what each of the settings 1 through 11 does, and you'll notice that some of them have a little asterisk beside them. Settings 3, 4, and 7, and 8. What this actually does is it changes how much you're either dropping or raising the note by 1 semitone. Maybe it's just my brain, but I had a really hard time understanding what they meant until I actually sat down, plugged it into a tuner, and figured out what was changing what by how many semitones. This graphic here demonstrates exactly the settings you need to be in and tells you exactly how many semitones it's either going to drop or raise the pitch. I've linked a free copy of that down below in the description for anyone who's interested. The last feature I think worth diving into is the fact that you can put this into a momentary mode or a latching mode. Up until now, we've been using the latching mode, so when you click it on, it stays on, and then when you want to turn it off, you just click it off. If you switch it to momentary using the moment button, what's going to happen is when you press the foot switch down, you're going to have to hold it. That's going to keep your effect on, and as soon as you release it, it's going to turn it off. Kind of working like a Digitech whammy without the expression. Now, the volume control has a secondary control. If you press and hold the moment button, the volume control is going to change the speed of the sweep. So right now, it's really immediate. If I play my chord and I hit that button, it immediately changes to the new pitch and then it comes back down. If I press and hold this, it's going to start flashing. Now, I can take the volume knob, and so this should be immediate. And as I turn the volume knob up, it's going to slow down that sweep. I can go further. Up till now, something we haven't talked about is the fact that this has a dry and a wet output. For all of the playing examples you heard prior to now, everything was just used straight out of the wet out, which means the mix on the pedal controls it, and then that's it. You just have that one signal, so if you're using 1 amp, totally fine, it's going to work great, and you just control the amount of the harmony with the mix control. If you're using intelligent harmony mode, using this dry wet approach is a really, really awesome way to get the best sound possible. Why does it sound better this way? Well, if you're using 2 amps, you, as the person mixing the song, if you're recording, or whoever's doing the sound, has full control over both your main guitar part and the harmony guitar part. What that means is you can pan it left and right, and you can adjust the volume of both of them so it fits in the mix better. And if I was going to use this pedal, this is 100% how I would do it. Another benefit to using this wet dry output is that you can take advantage of the doubling effect that's built in. In poly override mode, setting number 1 is a double, and what that does is it takes exactly what you're playing, but it puts it just slightly out of time so it really sounds like there's 2 guitar players. Now, if you've got this going through 2 different amps or 2 different profiles on a modeler, it's gonna really sound like there's 2 guitar players, or as close to that as you can humanly get. Obviously, you're the person playing both parts, but you do have 2 different tones, and it's gonna put it just a little bit out of time with each other, so something like playing some chords would sound really thick like this. Everything you've heard up until now has just been me playing through the pedal. I'm playing within a certain key, but I don't actually have a band behind me. I don't have any chords behind me. There's nothing I'm responsible to other than just playing the right notes in the key to make it sound good. Now, this is probably how you would test this thing out at a store, and up until this point, I thought it sounded super awesome. I didn't even consider that maybe it wouldn't sound as good when there's chords behind it because it plays all the right notes out of the key. How could it sound bad? So what I want to do now is I want to put this to the test in some sort of a real world situation. I've queued up a couple of different backing tracks, and I've thought about a few different ways I might actually use this pedal in gigging or recording. I want to see if it actually works the way I think it will. All those were examples where I actually wrote the parts. I really thought out what I wanted to do, and honestly, the pedal nailed it. I think it sounded great. There's no arguing. It sounded good. It sounded in tune. All the notes were very pleasant. Nothing sounded bad. What about if I were to just improv? What if I don't think quite as hard about my note choices? Now, I'm still going to stay in the key. I'm going to set the pedal accordingly. And what I want to test is I want to test the most 3 useful settings, I think, or maybe the safest settings is a better way to put it. I want to test a third below, a third above, and then a third and a fifth above. In my brain, those are going to be the safest because those are all chord tones. Let's see what happens. So far, the third below sounds good. Bend sounded fine. That wasn't so good. Let's hear that again. Oh, and it gets worse. Hang on. Here, it like glitches at the top. Okay, so I think there's maybe possibly two things happening here. So one of the things is the fact that now we've got the third above, so that's kind of competing with our ear for what the melody actually is. I think also we're getting all notes that are in the scale, but this thing doesn't actually know what chord is happening underneath. And I think the risk there is that you're going to have some harmonies that maybe don't sound quite right based on whatever chord is under the note you're playing. For example, I'm in the key of E here. I'm just going to use a hypothetical. It's not necessarily what happened here, but hypothetically, I'm in the key of E. There's an A chord happening underneath. Now, A is a very prominent chord in the key of E. It's the 4 chord. It's, I would argue, one of the 3 most common chords used in that key. Now, if I'm playing an A chord and I play an E note in the melody, in the solo, okay, that's the 5th of the A chord, A, B, C, D, E. It's also the 1 of the key, so that's a really safe note choice. Now, when this pedal is set to key of E major, 3rd above intelligent harmony, what it's going to do is it's going to take that E note I played and it's going to take 1/3 up from there based on the key. Now, in this case, that's going to be a G sharp note. That's the 3rd of E, but it's over an A chord. And it's possible that that could sound a little bit wonky. It definitely still fits diatonically. That would wind up being the major 7th of the A chord. But if that's sort of not the vibe or the sound we're going for, and we want to hear something that's actually in the A chord, like an A, a C sharp, or an E, it could tweak our ear a little bit. It may not sound the best. Also, I think probably what happened there was it just didn't track totally right, and you'll notice, especially towards the end, so there's 2 bad notes there. There was 1 right there. And I don't know whether it was just that the notes went too quick, or maybe that, because I was going back and forth between the G and the B string, something didn't quite get muted and it got confused. The other bad note comes in there when I do the vibrato. So again, it got confused about the note and it sounded, I think pretty bad. So let's just see what the rest of that sounds like. Yeah, there's another one. Oh yeah, okay, that one's full of them. Again, so I think there's 2 things happening here because it doesn't know what chords are happening. It makes the only note choice it knows how to make that we told it to make. That's fair. And then I think you got to be so careful with your playing, right? There's times where I'm sliding and it's possible that I'm getting, a little bit of 2 notes, even though I was really actively trying to not play any double stops or anything like that. It gets confused and the tracking gets all messed up and it doesn't sound super great. So that's definitely something to be aware of. Let's see what happens if I put it into minor context. So 3rd below again. That sounded good. This is the 3rd above. That sounds pretty good too. Even with the bend. Now we got 3rd and 5th above. Sounded pretty fine too. There were no really outside bad notes. It handled the bends pretty well, and I was like sliding up and down. I was digging into the guitar pretty good, and it tracked reasonably well for that. I think the 3rd and the 5th gets a little bit cheesy sounding. It was maybe a little less musical than I'd like it to be. I also don't think this is the best application for this pedal. I don't think I would ever just throw it on, improv with it on, not turn it off, and just play my whole solo that way. That's cheesy, and I think it would sound way better if you just used it for specific moments, specific lines, and probably things that were pre-planned. So how does this affect my decision to possibly purchase this pedal? It doesn't make it a bad pedal. It's not like they claimed it did something, and it doesn't. It does everything it claims it does exactly. Yeah, sure, sometimes the tracking's a little funny if you vibrato too hard, and obviously if you play some double stops, it's going to get confused. That's just the way this thing works, so if you're playing in an improv setting, you got to be really careful about those things. I still think this pedal has a lot of really good uses. I think all of the other features we talked about, the drop tuning, the capo thing, the whammy option, and the doubling, all make this really useful, and in my case, they kind of still do all the same things the Digitech Drop does and more. So I still think, harmony aside, which I know is what this pedal is actually designed for, all the other things are super awesome. Now, with the harmony, you just have to be a little bit choosy, and that's fine. You just really have to use it intentionally. You have to know that it's not always going to sound good. You can't just assume you can kick it on, and as long as you're in the right key, it's going to sound good. And now you know that. And you saw some of the examples that sounded really good, where I had a mapped out part that sounded awesome, or where I kicked it in just for a little bit, just to just to give it that little, get it up on top of the peak. Just, you know what I'm saying? Anyways, should you still buy this? Yeah, maybe. It does drop tuning fantastic. It does capo tuning fantastic, so you can go down 5 semitones, up 5 semitones. The momentary latching function with the ability to control the speed of the sweep is awesome. The doubling thing alone is possibly worth purchasing this pedal. It sounds really good. It's a great way to just widen your sound without having to do too much or having to have another guitar player. That's really cool. The intelligent harmony does work really well. You just have to be careful. Now that you're aware, it's all good. It's still a really awesome tool. What I don't like about this pedal, or where I think it could improve, is I don't like the fact that it's a little bit difficult to go through and get all the different settings you want. If I was going to use this for multiple things in a night, some of the things I talked about, like doubling, like harmony, like drop or capo tunings, it would be a lot of work to actually adjust it on the fly, and there's a really good chance I'd make a mistake. How could this be improved? Some sort of internal memory where you can actually program this, and I know that would put this pedal into a whole new ballpark, but maybe that's something that Electro Harmonix could explore in a future version. If I had the ability to switch that with a MIDI controller or in the pedal somehow, that would make this a really easy yes for me. The only other beef I have with this pedal is, I don't know what the heck they were thinking. I don't know if you can see this very well. Take a look at those jacks. Why is there an empty space underneath that? So here's what I'm thinking. I'm looking at this. I can straight up see the PC board. Everywhere. Here, here, here. If this was in my bag and something happened to rattle loose, say I threw a screwdriver in there, say, I don't know, what's something else you might keep in your bag that could fit in this hole? What if it gets jammed in there and somehow breaks the PC board? Now, maybe I'm being extra paranoid. Maybe I shouldn't have a screwdriver floating around in my bag, but this is something I think they really overlooked. Now, there's a simple solution. I'm sure I could find something to fill these holes, and if I were to go ahead and purchase this pedal, I would definitely be doing that, because I don't want to have something get jammed in there and break this relatively expensive pedal. At the end of the day, for everything it does, for the right person, I think this is an awesome pedal. I think it has so many cool features that are really unique to this that, as far as I know anyways, no other Harmony pedal has. Have you tried this? Are you wanting to try this? I'd love to know down below what you guys think. If you already own this and you're using it, is there anything I missed? Are there ways that you guys use it that I didn't think about? If you guys made it this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and attention in such a noisy world. I know this was a bit long, but I really wanted to take the time to unpack everything I could, because this is a pretty feature-rich little device. Until next time, I hope you get out there and make some music.